Welcome. Today I will unpack PowerShell functions. Put it simply, whenever you're repeating logic, instead of copying and pasting the logic over and over across your script, there needs to be a solution where you're making the logic once and then using it multiple times. This is where PowerShell functions come in. Functions are a way to turn code into your own tools that you can use at any time, not just across one script, but across many files, saving you hundreds of lines of code that you don't have to copy and paste over and over now. I already made some in our past videos, but today I'll unpack functions from scratch. So let's experiment with some PowerShell code and turn them into functions. So here we have some PowerShell code, and all it's doing is sending an email out, and it's doing so using graph. This first section, this is just to generate a token, but the second section is what we're going to use that token to send an email out, and this is all REST APIs. And how it works is I provide a subject, I provide a body, and then I provide who I'm sending the emails to, and then I do the API call and it sends the email out. Why don't I run this just to demo what happens? Okay, successfully sent an email, and there it is. Every time I'm writing my scripts, I don't want to have to copy all of this. And then when I'm making changes and I want to modify this, it's going to get very verbose. Like this whole section here is to send a to recipient. If I wanted to CC someone, I would essentially do this. And if I wanted to BCC someone, I would do this. If I wanted multiple people to send emails to, I would have to do this. So you can see that if I want to send these emails out to multiple people, it can get pretty long because of the format that it requires. We should simplify this so it's not so cumbersome to type. And a great way to do that is to make this whole process into a function. Back to where we were. We'll focus here. So to make a function is very simple. All you do is type the word function, and then you follow it up with a name. The name can be anything you want. I'm going to call it, let's say, generate graph email. Once you're done that, you put curly braces. Whatever is inside these curly braces is your function. This is almost like you're writing a commandlet. So if you wanted, you could actually use verb noun format. So if I do this, or dash here, that's basically how I'd write commandlets like get service or something else. But just be mindful, if you do use that route, that there's a lot of unapproved verbs, right? Like generate isn't a verb that is common in PowerShell. So you will see this warning that it uses an unapproved verb. You should really use ones that are common: new, get, set, etc. I'm going to use one called send. That makes more sense. Send graph email. Just be careful. What if this commandlet exists in a module or something? You don't want to make it so generic. Like I don't want to call it get-service because get-service already exists as a commandlet, right? Just be mindful that if you're making a function that it could conflict with a commandlet that already exists. So ideally, what you should do is either put your corporation's name or something that distinguishes this from commandlets. I'm just going to use the word MS, but use whatever your heart desires. So let's put our code inside this block now. So I'm going to copy all this. I'm going to go into my function and paste it. And I'll indent it. And there it is. Our code is inside a function. Okay, so now we are generating a token and then we are calling a function. But this is not going to work. If I run this, you can see nothing happened. I did not get successfully sent an email to, I didn't get this output, right? That's because all I have done is I put the function in memory. I never actually used it. In order to use it, I actually have to use this commandlet now. So I'll type send ms graph email. Now if I run it, it will work. There it is, sent email. Let me just comment this out and show you something. In my function, I can set variables. So let's say test variable equals 1, 2, 3, right? If I set this outside, say 4, 5, 6, after the function's run, I want it to output what it says in test variable. It's still going to say 4, 5, 6 as a result. The reason is the variables that are inside a function are self-contained. So you can use the same variable names within a function and they won't interfere with what's outside. Variables being passed in like this can work, but you really shouldn't do this. Ideally, what you should do is you should pass them in as parameters as part of the commandlet. Whenever you do get service and then you type dash something, like name, that is a parameter. We should do the same thing with anything we're passing into our function. So for this token, what we should add is a block called param or parameters. And here we define the name of it. So in our case, we'll call it token. So now when we want to pass this value inside our function, you can do it like this. See how it shows up when I just push the dash? And then you can put the variable in. Now if I run this section, it should work the same way and send another email, and it did. Now let's expand this. The problem is every time this function runs, it's going to send the same email to the same person every time. We want to expand this so that we could include all the values we want to send into our function. So if we wanted to have a particular subject name, someone particular to send it to, that's what we should really design our function to handle. So let's do that. And this is the most basic way to add params. All you do is add all the fields you want coming in. Subject, body, put a comma after each one. To, comma, the last one, from. Whatever is your last one, don't put a comma at the end. Now what we can do is wherever it is that those fields exist, we'll replace them with the variables. The body will go into content, subject will go into subject, to will go to, from will actually go in here. Right here is who I'm sending the email as. We'll replace that as well. And then here we could fill out all the values. So we could do then body. I'm going to use a here string, so I'll write it here and then just that. Body equals body variable. Great. Right. So now if I run this, I get another email called test email. There it is. Hi, this is the test body, just like how we had it. Oh, and one more thing we should do is here as well. Always, whenever you put a colon in a string with a variable next to it, it won't work unless you do it like this. Problem is, these aren't mandatory. These are, as of right now, optional. So if I don't add a to, it's still going to run the function. It actually failed at the right error, failed to send email. We should have it fail right here before it goes through all these steps and fails because it doesn't use the to. It didn't have anything in the to field. You just bring the to field back. So what we should do is in the parameters themselves, add something called mandatory. Way to do that is you put a square brackets. Here you write the word parameter, parentheses, mandatory equals $sign true. So this will say that if you don't have the word token, it will not work. So if I remove token from here, I run our function again, it basically forces us to supply a value. And if you don't supply it, it's not going to work. That's great. It's a good feature to have. So let's do that on all the fields that are always going to be required. A subject is always going to be required. A body of an email is always going to be required. To field is always going to be required, and from field is always going to be required. So we'll add it to all of those fields. And then you can also add what kind of data is coming in. Like token, if we actually look at get type, very particular kind of data set, PS object, right? So you can actually do that here, like that. Saying that parameter you fill here, make sure it's a custom object. If it's not, we're not going to accept it. Same is true for these. If you want it to be a string, which I'll do like this. Body, I'll do like this. What if you wanted multiple strings? You could do an array for sure. There's another way that's special with here, which is when you write the word string. Within the word string itself, you put another square bracket. This says that it will accept not just one, but multiple values added to the string. Let me also fix this. Sometimes not just one person you send an email to, right? So that's what this is going to do. And it's going to allow us to add multiple values. But recall when I mentioned that if you're going to add multiple twos, you're not just going to put this field once. In fact, for every person you're going to add, you're going to have to add them like this. So this will say there's two people coming in. So the way to do this is let's actually use a for each loop. First thing we'll do is this mail body part, take the to out of it and leave it like this. The message gets created with all this data. We'll also take this part out, say mail body convert to JSON 10. Because I don't want to convert this to a JSON yet. I'll convert it later at the end. What I'll do in the middle here is I'll basically inject the two recipients in a loop. I'll pipe it instead of for each. So I'll say mail body dot message. So I'm going down the chain dot two recipients equals, just like how we had it before. Let me just leave this here again, sorry, so we can see the structure and then compare it. So the very first layer is in two recipient is the array. So we want to make sure that we're setting an array for two recipients, but within the array is going to be multiple items. The way to do that, say the variable 2 could be one item or multiple items now. Do for each object, quickly brackets, and enter so we can see a new line. What are we adding in here? This part. We're basically writing this, then we're writing email address equals this hash table, address equals $_ So whatever the values in 2, that's what we're adding in here. And that's it. That should work. Just to make it lines, maybe we'll leave it like that. For each object, we're basically injecting this. Then we can remove this part. We don't need that here. It's going to create the mail body. It's going to add the subject and the body part to it. And then it's going to create our two recipients. And then it's going to put it all together as JSON for the REST API. Okay, so far so good. Let's make this mail actually. Okay, let's run that. Oh, sorry. Got to actually store this as a variable instead of outputting it. Let's not do that. Sure you spelled things right as well. So now if you want to expand, we could do this. Each one is a string that is passed in as an array within the 2 because of what we did here with the square brackets. It should work. Try that again. See, sent email to 2 people. There it is. Isn't that so much easier to write? You just do comma separate values and it works. Another cool feature is the ability to add validations right into the parameters. Kind of did one kind of validation, which is to see if it's mandatory true or false. There are other kinds. You can add regex to 2 to make sure that values we're sending are actually emails, and it will validate it right here before it even gets into the code. We don't have to make all these things one line either. You can always write it like this as well. So one of the first things I want to do is my from field. Let me move it above my 2 and my to field. They're both going to be emails. There's a lot of different kinds of validating patterns. So in our from field, the account that I'm using here can only send email out as 2 accounts. This is all I'm ever going to ever send emails out of. You don't have to do this for yours, but I'm going to do it for mine because all of my scripts are only going to be allowed to send emails from 2 things. What you can do here within the parameter for from, right after mandatory true, you can add square brackets, type the word validate. You see many kinds of them. I just need ValidateSet. Then I'm going to put parentheses to indicate what the set is. What this is saying is I will only allow you to put in the from field from a set of items. Copy and paste them here. So these are the only 2 emails I will allow you to add in from. If I show you this, if I type my command send ms graph mail, and I select from field, and I press Control space, it will give me 2 options. It will say either you have this as a field or you have this as a field. Same is true here. If I go to from here and put Control space, those are my 2 options. I can select one or the other. So that's great. Another kind of validation is called ValidatePattern. So in our from field, we don't care because we're only giving them 2 options. But in the to field, we want to validate a particular pattern where we say that you're only allowed to do values that fit this particular regex pattern. So I'll do the same thing here. I'll say validate pattern this time. I'll put in parentheses again. And within here, okay, I'm not even gonna try to teach this. This is regex. You can just copy something online. Google regex for email validation. There's so many different kinds. I'm just using a simple one. That's this. Basically, it's gonna check if it has an email structure. It has something before an @ sign, then the @ sign, then a domain name, including subdomains, then followed by an extension at the end. I'll put in the description below if you want to copy this particular one, but you can always Google these. And yeah, so now when I do 2 fields, so let's say I don't follow that pattern. I do no @ sign, for example. Then we run our function again. Cannot validate argument on pattern 2. The argument blah blah does not match whatever that pattern is. It'd be nice if you leave a custom message, but then you would have to use something called validate script, where you can literally write like a mini script here to validate the exact same process and then an output or a write error. But let's not go there. It doesn't need to be that complicated. We'll stick with what we have here, but let's expand on this. We have the ToField. What about CC and BCC, right? Let's do that. Let's just copy this, comma at the end. All this CC, comma. All this BCC, no comma. Because they're also going to be emails, and they're also going to be an array of strings, possibly. The only difference is these are not mandatory. Sometimes you're sending an email, but you're not CCing anyone. Sometimes you're sending an email and you're not BCCing anyone. So we'll do the same thing here for them, exact same process, just like that. But if you recall earlier, I showed you that instead of two recipients, a CC recipient, BCC recipient, this would be CC, our variable. This will be BCC, our variable. So what we need to do is make this optional. So what we'll do is if CC, meaning if it's true, do the stuff that's in the if and it's in here. Just like that. Same here. If BCC here. So now 2 is mandatory, so we'll do that. CC if it's optional, it will add it. BCC if there's values, it will add it. So yeah, that's working with patterns and validating them in our parameters. So ValidatePattern would validate the inputs against a regular expression. ValidateSet is what restricts what you're allowed to add or not. So in our case, it was the 2 emails. ValidateScript runs a custom script block, test validity, and we can do whatever we want inside of it because it's a script block. There's validate range, validate count, validate len, and on and on and on. There's a whole bunch. If you want to explore it, go for it. Now let's try this. Let's say ToField and do some CCs. Run it again. Sure, we sending an email with people. There it is. Sent an email to me, CC'd me, and CC'd someone else. Perfect. Okay, so as of right now, I'm just doing a write output, and that's just showing up as a return. Let's actually use something called return. Rather than writing write output, we can actually type the word return. This just means what I'm returning back from our function back to our code. Sometimes it's a variable you just want to return back. You don't have to do a write output. You want to return as the object itself. And that's what I'm going to do here, because this doesn't make sense. Sent email to blah, blah. I want to have more details than this. So let's do something more interesting. Right after the URI, before we do the try catch, let's make something called a return object equals type what kind of object it is. Partial custom object at $, like that. Now we can make our own custom object here. So the first thing is, let's say subject equals subject. So we return the subject as well. Now we have a success block and a fail block, right? I want to fill in a status as well. If I'm returning an object, it'd be nice to have the status, not just return an object to indicate if it succeeds or not. I'll say status equals nothing. Format this nicer. When we return, we actually return this object now. That. And the one thing we'll do before that is status.status equals success sent email. That'll make a lot more sense. And then the catch, when we return a fail, will be return object status equals failed, unable. Then this is where it's kind of more important, because errors where we really need to capture. And then a return here as well. Return just means terminate the function. So if I type it right here, by the way, like return, as soon as the function's called, it's going to read the params and then it's going to just finish right here. We want to make sure that it's doing it when in areas we want it to do it. So in our case, it's right here, the 2 blocks right here for try and catch. A write error won't return an object, but we want to return the object. So what we could do, kind of working around the issue, is we can say $, object, type, convert to JSON. Now if I run it, look what we get returned back. Nice, because now we can store this function command into a variable, and when we run it, get an object that has all those values. So we can see, who did we CC? Okay, these 2 people, great. All right, let's actually look at what the error will look like. Let's kind of break this and say, hey, maybe we'll just force BCC. I'll just comment these 2. I should break it and send us to the error. Right now we get the status, but we also get all these other errors. Let's actually improve this now. Let's splat params. Makes it a bit more easier to work with, better. Okay, let's fix this. Great. So we have a very simple sending email function. Let's keep expanding on this. One of the things I really want to add is sometimes emails are important, sometimes they aren't. You'll see a flag when it has like a little exclamation mark. I'll show you when we do it. Why don't we add that as an option here as well? Another parameter. I'm just going to copy this. Yes, time to write all this. Move this line and we'll call it important. Now, rather than being a string, there's another type we can use called switch. Switch is interesting because there's sometimes you may have noticed when you're sending, and actually have one. When I'm using this command to get a secret, I just have this switch here. It's not set to true or false, but by adding it in, it is setting it to true. That is what a switch is. And that's what we're going to use here for important. So if an email is important, you can add that switch. Right? So we can actually add it right here like this. And that's it. Done. You could also do this, by the way. But yeah, you can just say important. Cool. And now we'll send that email as an important one. And the other thing I want to do is, this is sending as plain text emails, right? The body is plain text. What if it was HTML? Right? We need to switch this word right here from text to HTML. But we want to have the options to do both. So maybe it's not an HTML. Okay, so don't put it. If it is, okay, add it. We'll add another switch. Same idea. Important. Comma at the end and copy it over. HTML. The same thing will happen here. I'll just have to have HTML. Now, how do we inject that here? A couple ways. If you're using PowerShell 7, we can just do my way right here that I'm going to show you. So rather than it being text, what we can say is HTML body. If it's true, make it HTML. Not true, make it text. This is called null coalescence, a different way of writing an if statement. Like that. And then for importance, okay, so this is set email as high important. Different levels, we only care about having it or not having it. Mail body dot message, same idea as ToField. We're just adding a whole other section called importance high. If you want to add that here, we can also do it here. Maybe right below subject, we can say content type equals. Should we write this? We can probably just write this. It's either text or HTML. So those are our 2 fields. Importance, call it importance. Cool. This is either true or false. So the switch is not there as false. The switch is there as true. Okay. So then our return object will contain all those elements too. So now in our params, if we wanted to, rather than adding it here, I'm going to add it up here. Add it up here. It's probably best to write the word true, just to be clear. Important, true. You know what? In my try catch, it's not failing the job. And the reason why I don't is because I'll leave that up to the script to decide if it wants to throw it or not. We can do right error, $sign like this, to throw. But this time, when the script runs, it may fail the function. Then if you wanted it to fail the script, you can do it here. Make that decision yourself. This. But when you do this, because this is going to send an error if it fails, you want to have your own rules set here. Error action stop, right? The script runs, error action stop, and then catches it and throws it. Or you can actually do it here. Just do it in our splat. Say error action equals, that'll work too. Let's try this. Starting to get long. Fine. And look at that, it failed. Let me actually show you. This output should not output. So now you can see our throw in action actually, since I didn't fill that. If I run this, it failed because we didn't add anything to the body. And then because of that, it never even got to this section, which is perfect. What do we want in our body? We want HTML. Let's do that. Hello, bold words. Let's do that. Now let's see. Oh, sorry. This is called importance. Should really use that word instead of important. Let's make it more consistent. Okay. That again. That worked. There it is. See that little red exclamation mark? That was important. You can see hello bold words are bolded. That's how we can inject HTML as an option as well as the importance. The final thing we should really add is sending emails with attachments. So let's do that. Same thing's going to happen. Maybe you have multiple. So why don't we actually copy string process. Validation out. Let's call this attachment. Be similar to this. Mail body message dot attachments. This is where I go. I go to the API for user send mail. I just searched my API call and I click the first link. Here it gives you all the data, by the way. Attachments goes right here. This is the block you want to create. So let's create that. Let's use that in our function. Same as before. Took me some Googling to figure it out, but this is basically how you can type it. Remove this. And the only problem is I made it into multiple strings, just like our to block. So it's going to need some for each to go through each, right? So there's going to be a little bit of change, and it's optional, right? This is not mandatory. This is optional. First thing we want to do is actually put our if attachments. Okay, I've been doing for each object. Maybe this time I'll show you how to do it with for each. Say file in attachment here. No, hold on. This. Attachments, and then it has a for each to add all this data. First file, for the second file, for a third file, etc. One thing we should add is what if the path is wrong? I don't want to send a file that doesn't exist and then fail because of that. So let's just say, okay, maybe let's just say if the file path exists. Like that. Okay. So what does all this mean? This means that it's telling Graph that this is a file attachment. This just gets the file's name. So whatever the file name is, that's what gets stored here, right? So this is saying this particular type, and this is just converting the file into base 64. Okay. Either way, just copy and paste it. You don't need to memorize all these. So let's go back to here, and maybe we can do an attachment. I'll need a file path. We'll do 2 files. Just like that, we can add attachments, comma separated. We give it a shot. Everything works. No. This is just because my token expired. Been running. What we should do is let's just run the whole thing. Okay, that worked. There it is. Look at that. Both our files got attached. Perfect. Like, look how easy this is to use now. All we do is provide a whole bunch of parameters. Then we just run our command, and we never have to interact with any of this information. But there is one thing we should still do is you ever type get help for a command? Let's say get service. Get this whole section, right? With name, syntax, etc., etc. And you can do detailed, get even more information, including examples and stuff like that as well. Now, what's funny is if you ever make a function and you do get help, then detailed. Look at that. That's pretty cool. We have a help section. We'll tell you all this kind of information, like in the from, what fields you can actually enter. In the to, you can add multiple strings, right? With the squares. Same with the CC, BC, importance, etc., etc. Pretty cool that we have this feature, but it's not giving us the information that we would want if we ever actually did use get help. It's just giving us very basic bare bones, right? Something that it picked up on its own, not something we provided. The cool thing is we can actually do that right before our function itself and actually add a comment block. Normally a comment block is just a comment block, right? You just write some comments. But if you put dot, look what happens. All these sections that are part of a function show up. Synopsis, you hit enter and types of words, sends an email using. Now if I do get help in the synopsis, it'll actually have that. Rather than demoing just one thing at a time, let me just do all of them. I'm going to sit through the whole thing, but I'll fast forward this. And then each of these parameters, you can actually expand on what they mean. So like token, you may not know what that means by default. So you can say the word dot parameter, still gray, but if I type the parameter's name like token, now it turns red. Meaning I can describe that particular one. So I can say Microsoft Graph access token. Subject. Body. Blah, blah, blah. Importance. Right? So we can do subject, body, from, to, CC, which by the way means carbon copy. BCC, which means blind carbon copy. Probably the most important thing is example. I'll show a simple one here, and let's say MS graph mail token to blah blah blah. I don't have to do that as the only example. Second one, generalize some things. And then you can even put something about outputs. So what kind of output do you get as a return? In our case, we're getting a PS custom object, contains fields. Finally, something about notes to explain who made this and all that. You can say I made it, version 1, blah, 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 blah. Now, if we run this and go into get help, look at that. So much more information to work with, right? Tells us all of our parameters. It gives us simple examples to work with and all that as well. One thing I will recommend, forgot to mention earlier, is whenever you make parameters, always add command lib binding. It really helps with all the common parameters like verbose, debug, error action, error variable. Let's have that. Yeah, just like that, we can make functions. We can even turn this into a function like that. I'm not going to walk through this one. And again, if you're going to make functions at the help section, that as well. We got a function to generate the token. We got a function to generate an email. In the past, I made a function to make HTML tables. I'll put that one in here as well. All right, so we have our token generating function. We have our HTML table generating function. And then finally, we have our sending an email function. Combination of all three would be very common when you are sending emails with some data that you want to have as a report table. And then all you would need in the future is this to make the table, this to get the token, and then this to send the email out. There it is. Successfully sent an email. Just like that. Combination of the 3 functions allowed us to quickly send an email out. Never have to type all those lines of code to basically do any of these things. Use just this line to generate our table. We use just this to generate our token. We use just this to send our emails out. So that's functions in a nutshell. We explored how to make them, how to use the many options for its parameters to make it more robust. Next video, I'll show you how to take this one step further. Because right now, even though this is our code right here, I still had to put all the functions before my code in order to use them. And that's hundreds of lines. But there are functions we use many times in our scripts. Wouldn't it be nice to not repeat the functions even within our code? Like imagine them being in their own file, and then you just access the functions in the file without ever having to type the functions within your code. Which has the added benefit of if you ever modify it, you never have to find everywhere that function was used and modify it there. You just modify it in this one toolbox of all your functions. And wouldn't it also be nice that you could do this in automation accounts in Azure? Either way, I hope this lesson was insightful. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.